Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham put her name to scores of bills over the past couple of weeks. With comfortable majorities in both chambers of the legislature, the bills, as we've discussed here before, reflect the changing nature of the Democratic Party. What will they mean for our state and what might have missed its chance in the regular session? Here to help us sort it out is the Line Opinion panel. We have two regulars and a frequent guest this week. Editor and publisher of the Santa Fe Reporter, Julianne Grimm, is back. Former New Mexico House Minority Whip Daniel Foley returns, as does another regular, Sophie Martin. Always glad to have Sophie. Now, let's start with the most recent action in the special session, because the governor has signaled she will sign the bill to legalize recreational cannabis. And Julianne, is this the game-changing law it would have been 2 or 3 years ago? Is this a matter of changing the language, which a lot of folks are trying to do? Or is New Mexico a little further back on the crest of the wave of states doing this?
I mean, even though New Mexico is not the first state, we're up in the high teens now. I think this is a game changer in New Mexico. This changes the way that, a lot of New Mexicans conduct their, daily lives. It frees people to participate in the recreational, relaxational substance of their choice, rather than saying alcohol is fine and cannabis is bad. So I think that is a big, significant change for New Mexico. We are also going to see tax revenues for the local and state government that represent not small sums of money, no matter whose math you are using. So I think those are two big changes that are coming.
Let me ask Daniel on your point there about the financial impact. Is it tourist, Daniel? Is it, native New Mexicans? Where's the largesse coming from when this thing gets going?
So I don't know. I mean, I think you're going to see a kind of like, and I'm not comparing the two. It's sort of like the gambling, right? You're going to see, if you're located in Albuquerque, you're pretty much attracting Albuquerque. If you're in Ruidoso or Hobbs, you're attracting people from Texas. So, I think the people in northern New Mexico, I'm not sure that it's that big of a deal because it's been legalized in Colorado. But the folks that live down on the side that are closest to Texas, big deal. A lot of people from Texas will be coming over. I think there's definitely going to be a tourism aspect. Look, New Mexico has long been an outdoorsy kind of hippie kind of state, right? I mean, it's kind of been a place where people like to come to Chaco Canyon, have a spiritual interaction. So I can see this enhancing that opportunity for more people to want to come here. I think it's also going to be I think to some level you're going to see an increase in the use of by New Mexicans. And so the question is, will you see a trade-off? Will people stop buying beer and alcohol and use that disposable income to buy marijuana, or what will happen? And so I think it's going to be a combination of the two. I think geographically will have a bigger impact on where that money, whether it's tourism or not.
Dan, let me go back to a question that was part of the question with Julianne as well. 2 or 3 years ago, you heard things like, "Oh, we're going to score 250 to 300 million our first year doing this." Now you're hearing things like 25 to 50 million, coming in. Do we really know how much we're going to make out of this in the first couple of years?
Not only do we not know how much we're going to make out of this, and look, I want to go on record. I've been a fan. I've been an advocate of decriminalizing and legalization since I was in the legislature. Don't use it. Yep. I just think it's odd that you can go out and drink a pint of vodka and that's okay, but you can't go out and smoke a little bit of weed. Makes no sense to me, and it's a personal choice. I think it's interesting that the numbers are coming down. One of the reasons I think the numbers are coming down is the growing process is becoming more manageable. There's more of pricing is becoming more effective, being able to go out and get it. I think, the big question is going to be the potential long-term consequences of what the net revenue is going to be, right? Are we putting away 10 or 15, 20, 30, $100 million today? And, the question that you hear from the people who opposed it, are there long-term consequences later on that are we getting that money today? And not more importantly, are we putting that money away to solve those consequences later? I think 25 is a far more realistic number. But remember, in the past, when we were talking about $200-300 million, it was when we were going to be one of the first states to legalize it. So you'd have people, there's no doubt that there's a complete cannabis tourism industry, right? I mean, there's an entire industry geared towards doing that. Now that we're not going to be one of the first five, I think that revenue is going to have an impact.
There you go, Sophie.
I think it's important
Go ahead, Julianne. My fault.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I think it's important too. And when you look at all these calculations about the over time, the changes to this, over time, the expectation is that fewer people will turn to the illicit market and more people will be buying their cannabis in these taxed and regulated industry, retailers. But that's not, going to be demonstrated until time marches on.
That's right.
I think there's a lot of factors that will feed into it, including like whether you see cities and counties raise their GRT. They're already, in the tax code allows you to increase your increment if you vote. And so kind of how much cannabis is taxed is really going to be a factor. Mm-hmm. The law also contemplates changing the tax rate over time. It doesn't just contemplate it, it's there. Mm-hmm. So the excise tax starts off at a certain rate, and over 6 years, it increases all the way up to 18%.
Good points there. Absolutely. Sophie, a really important part of this situation. Has this become more of a social justice bill?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that. So it's worth remembering that there were really two pieces of legislation that addressed New Mexico and cannabis that came out of the special session. And the first one that was decided was automatic expungement for certain what were criminal offenses relating to cannabis. And that automatic expungement will mean that people who have convictions for cannabis possession will no longer have those on their records. And that's a big thing because that record can follow and does follow somebody as they try to get jobs, as they as they go through their lives. And so that expungement, that clearing of that record, because we no longer consider this to be a criminal matter, mm-hmm. is a very big deal and something that they were able to take care of up front. Mm-hmm. When we talk about the costs and the look at it from an economic perspective, it's still important to think of the social justice and the community justice issues for us in for a larger community in New Mexico, and then also to recognize that there will likely be savings in terms of our incarceration costs and our policing costs. I know, yes, we will still have DUI laws on the books. People won't, there won't be no consequences if there are issues with your cannabis use, but certainly those smaller, what we now consider pretty inconsequential possession charges, they now go.
Let me switch a gear here. Julianne, I'll start with you. The governor signed a number of educational bills, including, to make sure federal aid flows to low-income districts, as well as more state money targeting, many of those same places, and also to create an ombudsman for special education. Let's not forget about that, and to get more teachers from state colleges and universities. Does this feel significant? Something feels significant here when you take them all and push them all together in that education pile.
Well, I think that with the Democrat-controlled legislature and with the governor's priorities, they were able to push through some of those, plans that have been long envisioned by that faction. And I think that overall, that will help education in New Mexico. I still think we've got a long way to go, and especially with school just returning in person and all of the kinks that need to be worked out with that, and the awareness that internet connectivity is really a big problem. I don't think that it was a new problem that, cropped up, but it just became, people became much more aware of how this can affect a student's potential outcome, whether they have steady, reliable access to the internet or not. And so I think that while some of these big funding wrinkles have been ironed out, that there's, you're going to see a lot more education reform happen, I think, under this current leadership if it continues.
Julianne, Yazzie Martinez is sort of floating over this whole thing. Does this help in that situation? Again, all these individual bills getting towards that goal?
Certainly, I wasn't able to review every single piece of the package that's kind of known as the Yazzie Martinez package of reform. But, that court case really made a lot of directives to the state, which I think the state has been really slow to roll out. And again, with the pandemic, those areas where the need was great, it just became exacerbated. It became more obvious how great the need is and what New Mexico needs to do to serve students in rural areas, for example, and students who have language differences, who have English as a second language, and in Native communities. Those are really important.
Yeah. Dan, broadband came up just a little bit ago. We've been watching close over here, the rural-urban divide on these things. But creating oversight for, state spending to look close at that divide, does it feel like the state is starting to get a handle on what it's going to take to expand broadband? Or are we there yet? Or would you like to see something a little bit more?
Yeah, I think, in a lot of these technology things in New Mexico, we're always a day late and a dollar short, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking about broadband and, now, as someone who owns an RV, people are now talking about, satellite connectivity, and that, it's $280 a month and you can have this thing on your motorhome that allows you to have broadband, wide access through the satellite, and as long as you're clear to the sky. And here we're still talking about burying cables and wires and digging holes and getting right of ways. And so, I think we've talked about this before on the show. One of the problems New Mexico has is a unique situation, which is we have wide swaths of open land between urban areas. So, because you have stuff in Albuquerque doesn't mean you're going to be able to get all of that out to Wagon Mound, New Mexico. And it's virtually impossible. So I'd like to see them, not only talk about this, but hopefully with this group that they're putting together, they're going to put some, we put money into being a spaceport state. We've put money into doing other things. We should be putting money into becoming a technology hub, because if we can figure it out here, you're going to figure it out anywhere pretty much in the world, right? If you can figure out a way to communicate in Cloudcroft or Wagon Mound or all the way down in Carrizozo, you're going to solve a lot of problems across the country and around the world. And we need to be focused on some of that. And I think we lose that lots of times. We focus on, how do we help the Ma Bell companies? How do we help the co-ops? How do we do these other things that are out there? And we forget that there's other alternative answers.
Good point there. Hey, Sophie, the governor signed the Civil Rights Act, kind of a big deal for a lot of folks around here. It allows claims in state district court that previously had to be filed in federal court. This is a big deal when you think about it. It removes qualified immunity as an acceptable defense to those claims, but it also caps claims, this is one of my questions here, at $2 million. That seems bizarre to me. Is that just a starting point and the courts are going to have to figure that out as it goes along?
That's a great question. But the cap is there. And my sense was that it was put in place, at least in part, in order to get the thing through, because there was a lot of pushback. And, state government is quite powerful. Mm-hmm. Municipal governments are quite powerful in New Mexico. And this bill, this change really strikes at the immunity that employees and then, their employers, the state actors, had in the courts. So, qualified immunity was an imperfect program. It's kind of a mess. But with New Mexico sweeping that away, it really remains to be seen how this is going to work in the courts. Mm-hmm. And I think that the coverage that we've seen so far has maybe missed one detail that is pretty important here, which is that the qualified immunity applies to violations of rights under the New Mexico Constitution, and those are not everything, right? That's not, you can't sue for literally everything. Mm-hmm. If you take a look at the Bill of Rights in the New Mexico Constitution, it picks out different things, but it's not, that may also need to be addressed, how broad those rights are defined within that.
Yeah. Little ways to go on that one, but it's a start, as they say. And Julianne, just a little bit of time here on this one. Legislation that didn't make the cut. Do you want to take a couple things here? 3 areas that caught my attention. Police reform, of course, payday lending, and professionalizing the legislature. I'm curious, which of those 3 things surprised you the most with its, let's say, unpopularity among lawmakers?
Well, these efforts to reform lending in New Mexico, small-time lending, sometimes it's called payday lending, storefront lending, predatory lending is the term that we've used at the Santa Fe Reporter quite a bit. We dove into this issue before the session began because, of course, this is not the first legislative session in which lawmakers have entertained reform. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, it was a loser this session. You had a bill that was introduced by Senator Bill Soules that would have capped these types of loans at the same rate rate that the military issues a cap. You can't issue one of these loans to a member of the military for higher than 36%. But in New Mexico, we said it's okay to charge just any New Mexican who's in need of money 175% interest. That's what we think is okay. That's what our legislature thinks is okay. We had some negotiation in the House where they bifurcated different types of predatory loans in terms of trying to set a higher cap for some and a lower cap for others. And ultimately, those amendments weren't friendly to the Senate. And so that bill died in the concurrence committee. And I'm sure we'll see it come back again at a future session.
There you go. That'll do it for our legislative look. We'll no doubt be talking about all the last-minute signatures or vetoes on this program and on our social media. Just search New Mexico in Focus on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.